So we are going to try to ask great questions right now on the River Islands guest line with our absolute favorite NFL Films executive producer, Greg Cosell. Hello, Greg. How are you this week?
Gentlemen, what's happening?
You know what? Less urgent football than we thought. That's how I'll answer that.
Yeah, I guess it's not likely they'll be in the playoffs, huh?
It is highly unlikely, Greg. It is highly unlikely. Listen, we definitely want to go over the Rams game that was almost a week ago. Also talk out some things about not just the Niner quarterback, but some other quarterbacks around the league who are making news right now. But can we start with this? For a lot of 49er fans, the moment that the season really kind of ended was when Brock Purdy threw that deep interception in the end zone against the Rams when they were already in field goal range. We want to play for you what Kyle Shanahan said today about that interception, because it felt like he was kind of taking some of the blame away from Brock, and then get your breakdown of the play.
You mean the play? Go ahead. Okay.
Yeah.
You mean the play where Jennings was illegal contacted twice?
So first of all, you've jumped Shanahan. So that's great. Listen to Kyle, and then I'd love to hear more about that. Here it is.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think Brock's an extreme aggressive guy in terms of, you guys don't see him throw a lot of picks. He doesn't throw into double coverage much. When it's single safety, you want to hold the middle third player and throw a double move on the outside corner. You'd love to be able to check whether he's got a chance or not. But when he did look out there, the guy squatted, and then he bumped him, which is ICT. You can't hit him 12 yards down the field, which stopped Juwan. And then he's got a pass rush coming at him. So it's really easy to say with the clicker in our hand and stuff when he's not on top. But to hold a safety and then look out there, see a guy at a dead stop, and then have a two technique coming right at you, he's going to let that go. And what you coach, so in the heat of battle, I always tell the receivers, worst case scenario in situations like that is offensive PI. It's never a pick. I don't care if you have to tackle the guy. So the first thing I look at is, does Juwan stop on the play? Because he's got to protect Brock, and so we can at least survive it and have a chance to overcome the penalty. And he couldn't get to it. Once he stopped him there at the 12-yard spot, couldn't catch back up. And I'd love Brock to check it down, but the protection's got to be a little bit better for him to see all that. And the corner did stop. So it was just an unfortunate play.
Okay, so when Kyle refers to an ICT, he's saying basically the same thing you just did, which is that it's an illegal contact penalty. So, Greg, what's your breakdown? It sounds like you agree with his.
The only thing I would say is, if you're going to throw a stutter go, it's hard to throw a stutter go against a bailed corner, and Williams was bailed. He was playing 9 yards off. So, again, Kyle could disagree with that, and hey, he certainly knows more than I do, but that's the only thing I would say. But the bottom line is, Jennings was illegal contacted twice. He was illegal contacted by Quentin Lake on his initial stem, and then he was absolutely illegal contacted by Williams. So, we can debate whether Brock should have thrown it or not, but you're not throwing it expecting the illegal contact. So, but that's a fact. I happen to be looking at the play again right now while we're talking. So he was illegal contacted twice. So the only thing I would say is, and I don't know how it's coached. I know coaches deal with it differently, but some coaches will say you're not going to throw a stutter go versus a bailed corner, but I don't know Kyle's philosophy on that.
Well, as I'm looking at the play myself, Greg, letter of the law, yes. The first reroute happens at the 6-yard mark. So if we want to pick nits and talk about the 5-yard bump, this occurs about a yard beyond that.
Well, the ball's at the 33. Okay, I'm looking at it right now.
Yes, as am I.
Right, he gets contacted. Yeah, that's close. It's like the 27 or so. It could be, but it could be called. Normally that's called because he gets pushed pretty good by Lake. Okay, it's not like a little love tap. He gets pushed off his route, but clearly Williams with his right hand illegal contacts him. You can't do that.
Well, that's to me, it looked to be like two-way hand fighting. Jennings is extending his arm as well, but that's neither here nor there. My question to you is more a general one about what you see on the film about checkdowns, because it seemed to me in this game that Brock had 3 or 4 opportunities to check it down, but he's too married to the deep throw. Did you see instances in this game where he could have taken checkdowns?
That's a whole. we're not going to know the answer to that because we don't know how that's coached. And let me just say a couple things. And this is not a defense of Brock Purdy, who, by the way, I'll tell you what I said in my notes so people understand that this is not a defense of Brock Purdy, because I did say that Purdy has not been as decisive turning the ball loose with the kind of timing and anticipation throws that have been his strength since he became the starter in his rookie season, that there have been times he's been tentative, and that has resulted in throws we have seen him make sometimes not being attempted. So this is not a defense of Brock Purdy, okay? But there's a couple of things that we'd be having a totally different conversation that have nothing to do with Purdy. If Samuel doesn't drop that ball, that may have been a touchdown, okay? And we might be having a totally different conversation about the game. You know the play I'm talking about on 3rd and 10 from the 29-yard line midway through the third quarter. And Samuel's physicality totally beat Williams on the inbreaker, and Purdy put the ball right on him, and he had run after catch. Now, whether he scores or not, we don't know, but he certainly gets into the low red zone. So we might be having a different conversation. Now, obviously, he made a poor throw, and it was a missed opportunity when he missed Pearsall wide open on the deep post on the 1st and 10 shot play. He underthrew that badly. That should have been a walk-in touchdown, and that's one that he just missed. He underthrew it by quite a bit. He just missed it. I also thought that he also had Samuel on a middle seam on 2nd and 20 from deep in their territory, but he left the throw short, and that allowed Kitchens to undercut it. I thought that could have been a better throw as well. But the checkdowns, that's something you have to understand how that's coached, how he's coached to look at what he's looking at and when to come to a check down.
Yeah, and that's hard to, I guess, know unless you're in the room, because I'm looking at that same play, Greg, 2nd and 20, and my notes on that one, your notes better than my notes, but my notes, right, I wrote down that Grendo was open on that throw, 2nd and 20 to Deebo, and that's why I was asking you about the checkdowns, because it seems like there's a lot more available that he took last year that he's not taking this year.
That's a hard question to answer, and like I said, it's hard to know, because don't forget, when you call a vertical route, you're starting with the vertical route. You're not starting with the checkdowns.
Right.
So if you feel that the vertical route is there, okay, and all you can say is what's in the quarterback's head. We're not in Purdy's head, but when you call routes where you have a deep to short concept ending with a check down, the check down is the last thing, not the first thing.
Greg Cosell, NFL Films, is with us. I'm glad you brought up Ricky Pearsall, even though you were just kind of talking through a play, because we've talked about him with you before, and there's been a lot of discomfort from the fan base at how few opportunities Ricky's gotten. And I think people want to know, is that because of the way Ricky is running routes or the offense? What have you seen with him as his games develop?
Well, let me ask you this.
Okay.
If Purdy didn't underthrow that ball, would we be having this conversation?
Not this early in the conversation.
It's funny. I made it a point to watch Pearsall closely because you guys ask me about him every week, and he wins on some routes. Sometimes the ball's not thrown. He obviously won on the 16-yarder on 2nd and 9 midway through the fourth quarter, where he beat Witherspoon on the inbreaker, and actually Purdy had a move in the pocket on that play, which was really good pocket movement, making an off-platform throw. And then he obviously, on that deep, ball, I forget who he ran by, but he just ran by him with speed, and that should have been a walk-in touchdown. So, no, I don't. The other factor, too, is you have to remember he's a rookie. Okay, think back to a lot of rookie receivers. Was Brandon Ayuk a big-time stud in his rookie season?
No, not a big-time stud.
No, I mean, you have to understand these things, that sometimes it takes time. I can go back in history and talk about a lot of receivers that have become good, and no one's going to put Pearsall ever, in the category of the Jamar Chases or the Justin Jeffersons or the, Devontae Adams, who, by the way, also struggled in his rookie year. But, so I don't think there's a problem with rookie Pearsall.
When you look at this Niner offense, and particularly the passing game, do you see an offense that struggles against man? And if so, what are the reasons that you see on film that has led the passing offense to struggle against man coverage?
I mean, I think at times the receivers do struggle to get open overall. And by the way, there's really not a lot of speed on this offense. I mean, you could argue Pearsall's the fastest guy on the offense, and he's a rookie receiver. This is an offense that lacks speed. So there's really no speed. And keep in mind, it's not just the pass game. This is an offense that has not run the ball this year the same way that they've run it in the past. And really, that's the starting point of this offense. Everything kind of works off that. As good as Purdy has been throughout his short career, he's still in many ways a quarterback that needs a multi-dimensional offense. I hate to use the word system quarterback. Everybody is a system quarterback, by the way.
Yep.
But he needs a complete offense. He's not Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes. I was having this conversation with people and they play Miami this week with the guys who work with me on the matchup show. And I was talking about Tua. And you guys know Mike McDaniel, obviously, and I know him as well. And I think we all have tremendous respect for him. But Tua's dropping back 40 times a game this year. That's way too many. He's a system quarterback. You can't do that. They have no run game in Miami. No real run game. Everything is space. Let's get guys in space. Sometimes you have to line up and run the ball. The Niners do, but they've not had much success, certainly in the last 5, 6, 7 weeks. So, and by success, I mean sustaining success. Is there a big play every once in a while? Yes. But I'm talking about the kind of success that allows you to stay on schedule as an offense and keep your playbook totally open, and you dictate to the defense and you control the pace and tempo of the game.
Greg, I'm looking forward to getting back to the Miami Dolphins further in this conversation. Tyreek Hill said something today that we can discuss. But what about this? Both Jerry Rice and Steve Young publicly stated this week Kyle Shanahan, who has done this before, needs to reinvent himself. Do you agree with that statement, and what does that mean to you?
I don't know what it means because I don't know what it means to them. I mean, can you give me more information about? Well, I guess
the context of the conversation is that it's sort of along the lines of what Dibs was just saying with the man defense and how it is getting the 49er offense to struggle. And so Kyle Shanahan, maybe the league looked at him all off season, and maybe they found some weak points and they were helped by injuries and all of that stuff. But it's time for Kyle to kind of maybe evolve that offense a little bit. Do you agree with that?
I think that coaches are always looking to do that. And by the way, this is not the first time that the league would be looking at Kyle Shanahan's offense. He's been coaching in the league for a long time and doing a lot of the same things in terms of what he does. All coaches have kind of, a template of what they do. Now, can they add to that? Can they adjust? Sure. And if they're talking about, maybe making some adjustments, I can understand that. I think every coach, let's put it this way. My guess is Kyle's trying to do that anyway, whether they're successful or not. We're not going to know the answer to that. But there are certain things that you have to be able to do, and if those things don't happen, like if they can't run the ball, okay, let's just say if they can't run the ball, it's going to be really hard to have a consistent offense because as good as Purdy can be as a certain kind of quarterback, he's not going to take over a game in the way that, Mahomes or Allen or Lamar Jackson can. He can't do that. So they need to be able to run the ball. Now, if you want to talk about whether he's got to change his run game, that's a different question, and there's not 1,000 things you can do in the run game.
And one thing that you mentioned earlier about space in Miami, and I look at this Niner offense, Greg, and they don't utilize the width of the field very often. Is that what you see on film? Does it become easier to defend an offense when you have so many tight splits offensively?
Not necessarily. The Rams are a tight split offense. So that's, again, every situation is different. There's no hard and fast rule. That's why these answers, there's no specific answer here there's not one thing. Oh, if Shanahan does this, we'll be good to go. There's no specific answer. The Rams are a reduced split offense, and they're very good at it. A lot of teams run reduced splits and have success. So it's, that's a hard question to answer. But the one thing they do lack is speed. And they have really, so in some ways the offense is somewhat conditioned condensed, and it's condensed because they just don't have any speed.
Greg, getting Dre Greenlaw back out on the field, I think for while he was out there was invigorating for fans. He maybe looked better than people thought, but I wonder what specifically you saw on film.
Yeah, he looked pretty good. I mean, he looked good right from the start. Because I mean, obviously he's a very he's a rangy player. He's a movement player. He's an aggressive player. He's a competitive player. No, I thought that he looked pretty good. This game was an odd game because the Rams controlled the ball for more than 35 minutes, but they were only 4 for 15 on third down. Those two things normally don't go together.
Yeah, and you look at what they did in the second half, and it feels like a blueprint for the season where Kyren Williams was able to just run up in the A and the B gap and have his way on the ground. When you look at the film, is that a glaring weakness of this defense for the 49ers, their inability to control the action between the guards?
But he didn't have his way. Only 11 of his 29 carries gained 4 or more yards. That's what's so strange about the game. He didn't have his way. That's a very low percentage. So it was a very odd game. And don't forget, he had 29 carries for 108 yards. And like I said, only 11 of them gained 4 or more yards. So it was a very strange game in that regard.
Yeah, and I'm looking at his runs, though, in the fourth quarter, and 5 of those 11 came in the fourth quarter. I was just theorizing about a second-half Niner defense that has struggled routinely in the late game scenarios against that very thing.
Yeah, and obviously in a close game like that, that's where you want to shut them down. But and don't forget, that was the nature of that game where those 5 runs, that probably gained 6 or 7 yards, seemed like huge plays because the score was 9-6.
Yeah.
Greg Cosell, NFL Films. Definitely want to ask you about this week's opponent, Miami. And I know Tua's been in and out, and so that's the obvious answer to some degree. But Tyreek Hill, for example, this morning tweeted, "It's time for me to go, coach." I don't know how to translate exactly what he means by that. My guess is it's time for me to cook, right? It's time for me to get more. What do you see with that offense? Because he had such that generational year last year, and it just hasn't been there this year. What do you see?
Well, number one, I think they throw it too much. Number two, I think that teams tactically are doing some things to take away those inbreakers. See, Tua is a phenomenal window thrower, but he's a specific kind of quarterback, and he's a pure timing rhythm player who works between the numbers and between the hashes. And some teams obviously do a better job than others. That's always true in the league. Even though everybody knows what he is, some teams just are better equipped to handle it than others with how they approach it. For instance, last week, the Texans did a really good job with a tactic that they used. Other teams have done a really good job at times. But beyond that, there's not Tua is very specific. He's very good at what he is, but he's not more than that. And when it is working, they just eat up yards and yards and yards because they get a ton of run after catch. They may have to try to go more vertical and take some shots and try to push those corners back and we don't know if Waddle's going to go this week. That remains to be seen. But certainly Hill, he can run by people, but you don't run by people 10 times a game. So, they may have to think through just some. But the other thing is the run game, it's so funny. Everybody talks it's a passing league, and you need a great quarterback. And, obviously no one's going to say that that's not true. But, at some point you got to line up and run the ball. And they don't line up and just run the ball. Everything is about space. And they have all this speed with A-Chain, even the back they drafted from Tennessee, right? It's all speed, but they don't really line up and run the ball.
Yeah, the teams that have run the ball, the 6 most in the NFL, are all in current playoff spots. So to your point, when you look at the Miami defense, Greg, what do they do from a scheme standpoint that the 49ers are going to have to try to counteract?
Yeah, they haven't been as good this year, as they were in the past. So they've struggled a bit. So defensively, from a coverage perspective, I mean, look, the bottom line is they're going to have to try to run and get their run game working. Because if they can't get their run game working, it's going to be really, really hard. And I'm being honest, it's going to be really, really hard to play if they can't get their run game going because, they're sort of built on being able to do that. Now, the Dolphins play very, very little man coverage. I mean, in fact, they play the lowest percentage of cover one in the NFL. They're a heavy cover three team. Now, assuming they do the same thing, there's many ways to attack cover three, and that's what you have to do. You've got to call cover three beaters, and then you got to protect. You know, they've been missing Trent Williams, who I guess could well be out again this week.
Yep.
I don't think he practiced today, right?
No, he might. Kyle actually said he might be out for the rest of the year.
Well, there you go. So,
Yep.
I mean, that's an issue right there. You know, that changes things too. Because you know what that does? That forces you in certain situations to have to help your left tackle. And that changes and limits your pass game. See, all these are factors, guys. It's never one thing. And, you know, I try to explain that. You know, I've done the matchup show. I created it in 1984. And one of the main things I've always hope that people understand when they watch the film segments that I do is that there's a lot going on. There's never one answer. There's so many variables as to why things work or don't work. It's, you know, we always focus on the quarterback. Oh, what's wrong with Brock Purdy? Oh, must be the play calling. You know, there's always an easy answer, you know, that everybody, you know, fans in the 700 level feel that they know the answers. It's way more detailed and nuanced than that.
Greg, what a perfect segue into the last thing I wanted to ask you, which is to weigh in on the topic du jour of the week, because Brian Baldinger was on our station yesterday, and the guys asked him, what would you tell John Lynch to do about the Brock Purdy contract talk? And his answer was, I'd go flip him for Sam Darnold. Now, look, I'm not going to ask you to weigh in on trades or signings or whatever, but can you tell our audience what you see with Brock this year and what feels like a little bit of a regression, and Sam this year and what feels like a little bit of an elevation? What's going on there?
Well, Darnold's playing at a really high level. He's in a really, you know, a different offense than the 49ers. It's a little more intermediate and vertical based in the way Kevin O'Connell structures his offense. He's obviously got really good receivers, but again, you still have to always isolate the traits of the quarterback. Darnold is clearly incredibly comfortable this year, and one way you know that he's very comfortable is he's sitting in the pocket, letting the bodies get around him, and still making big-time throws. In the past, if he did that, he just didn't see things clearly. This year, he's seeing things clearly, which, you know, I'm sure a function of Kevin O'Connell and the way he's being taught. You know, obviously he was only in San Francisco as a backup, so we have no idea, you know, what would have happened if he'd been the starting quarterback. And you always have to be careful. You know, Darnold is a more physically talented quarterback than Purdy. No one would argue that. So, you know, if he was the Niners quarterback, how would he run Kyle's offense? We don't know the answer to that. He was here, but he didn't play. But he's obviously been very receptive to what Kevin O'Connell teaches and the structure of that offense and the receivers that they have. And by the way, a run game that's been better than the 49ers. So there's been a lot of elements that have really helped Darnold, but he's played at a high level.
Greg, great stuff. Happy holidays. We won't talk to you till after. Thank you as always.
Oh, what do you guys get time off? What's going on?
Well, that's the word. We're gonna try.
Hey, I don't get any time off, guys, you know?
All right, then I'll just call you next week on Wednesday. We can just chat, just you and me.
All right. All right.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Greg.
All right.
Yes. Greg Cosell, NFL Films.